Welcome back, our viewers. And if you've been following this YouTube channel and you haven't subscribed, please do so today. If you can hear me and you can see us, please subscribe. It's free, and that's to encourage us. I have with me this afternoon these wonderful ladies, Jessica and Olive. Jessica, Olive, and I, we're going to be talking about racism in Canada. What do we consider to be racist? Does it really happen in Canada? Canadians are known to be polite, they say, I'm sorry, but do you sometimes see a bit of racism even beneath that politeness? Or is it just perceived by the ethnic group? Or is this really, really happening? So we're having this conversation today to help all of us understand one another better and hopefully do better as well. I'm going to set the tone for the conversation. I always like to start with a story. And even more so when we talk about racism, it's better to come in the form of story so that people understand the things that happen. Because there are things, we must all have heard about microaggressions and things like that. If you're not Jessica, if you're not in this color, it's difficult for you to understand. So the way I can make you kind of understand is to give you a few examples. A couple of days ago, I went into Metro in my neighborhood. I wanted to buy a couple of things. So on my way in, I wanted to get some bananas. Given that it's COVID, you have to have social distancing. There was a Caucasian guy filling the shelf. He was filling the regular bananas. And there was this Black lady trying to, on the side of the organic bananas. So the way it's set up in this store is you have the regular bananas, you have the organic bananas, and then you have the plantains. So this lady was trying to get the plantains. So this guy loaded the shelf. When I got, they were there before I got there, because I stepped aside to give her room to finish so I can go get mine. So he kept saying to her, at least I heard him say it 4 times, those are organic bananas. Those are organic bananas. But I think she didn't respond. So I thought she just chose to ignore him. He said it four times. Those are organic bananas. And I was waiting to get organic bananas. I was saying to myself, I hope he doesn't say this to me. Finally, the lady said, very soft-spoken lady. She said, I'm just trying to get some plantains. So she got her stuff and she moved. And then I came. So as I moved, I knew he was going to say it. So he looked at me again. I said, it wasn't saying in a nice way. It was saying in a way like, oh, these people are probably dumb, right? And they can't tell the difference. Or these people, they can't afford the organic ones. They must want the regular ones. So I need to show them what to do. So I got that, and then he turned to me and said, those are organic bananas. So I looked at him and I said, I know what I want. So I did like this, like I can see. But then I said, thank you. I tried to be nice. But those are the kind of microaggressions that you get that you wouldn't have experienced, Jessica. And another example I'll give to you, this happened in England and it happened to my uncle. My uncle is late now, was a medical doctor. He trained in Nigeria and he also trained in the UK. So sometimes he goes from Nigeria to UK to do what you call the locum. So he was there, he told us, and he said sometimes you would have the patient come in, a Caucasian patient come and say, oh, I didn't know you were Black. And he had a wonderful sense of humor. So he told us, I would say to them, oh, I'm sorry, there's nothing I can do about that. Can you please have your seat and let me know why you're here? So just to let you know the things that Black people, colored people go through every day. So Jessica, I want to ask you, we want this to be a very factual, real conversation. How do you perceive a Black person?
That is a really loaded question, right? And there are a lot of layers to it. And, the first thing that I will say is, I notice that they're a Black person.
Yeah.
Right. So I won't ever say I don't.
And you should.
I don't. I mean, if I was to say I don't see color, that's just really.
It's not true.
It's not true. I notice very clearly, and I can share a story of my own when I was, I guess, about maybe 2 or 3. This is a story that's relayed to me. I don't remember this exact moment, but my grandmother had a very good friend who was Black and from Barbados. And, I, being a child, observed, like, why is Mavis's skin black? Or, I don't know if I said black, but, like, why are we different skin colors? And, so that opened up a conversation there. And I think that I was exposed from an early age that, just because someone's skin color is different, there's no difference between the two of you. So I grew up thinking that that was it, right? Just because I don't perceive a difference between two people because of their skin color, I must not be racist. It took until a lot later in my life to realize that there are subtexts. So these microaggressions that you speak about that are built into the way that we're raised, the way that we grow up, and how we perceive people beyond the skin color that affect so much more.
Perfect. And I like that you say that, because I've kind of, Olive, I'm coming to you, I kind of observed that the level of racism in a person to a large extent depends, one, on the exposure, on the level of education. Not to say educated people can be racist, but it's more brutal for people that are uneducated. Mm-hmm. And it makes me think sometimes that if you perceive someone as being less or not as smart as you because of their skin color, then I think it's a reflection on the level of your intelligence.
Oh, absolutely.
So, Olive, I want you to join this conversation. Can you tell us a story? I know you would have many of what you've experienced professionally in the community, and maybe you speak more to how we feel when we're demeaned that way. How do we feel as people of color?
All right, so thank you so much for having me on your YouTube channel. Racism has to start with, we're so quick, regardless of what race you come from, to say, oh, you're racist, and so on and so forth. But I think we have to start with yourself, that internal bias, right? Because we all have biases, even within our own communities. Like from where I come from my country, we have tribes that we think are superior to others.
And by the way, Olive is from Kenya. I'm from Nigeria. So we're Africans, but very different. Go ahead.
No, it's not all of one country.
No, thank you.
Yeah, it's not all one country. Yeah. And we have internal biases and we have all these stereotypes, So when I moved to Canada, I did, grade 13 at the time. And then I went to University of Ottawa. So obviously when you're in school, I find like, the old like university, high school, it's not as bad because people are exposed to people of different cultures, but as I was graduating, I had these things like when you write your resume, remove your last name because your last name will sell you out. So because you're graduating and you want a job, you're tempted to take out that last name. So like mine is Orimoloye, which sounds Canadian. So when when it's easy to get through the door, then you can add your last name. And it's a very common thing that people of color, right? People do, because sometimes if it's a screening process, like, I've had that a lot in the government, people take that out because they're like, oh, it's going to stop me from, I know people who have changed their names, So I remember when I was blessed enough to have a job even before I graduated, and a professional job. And it was very competitive, but, you go, you show up, you don't change your color, you are who you are. And, by God's grace, you get your job. And then when I decided to now pursue my professional studies to become a CMA, I remember my boss at the time, no boss, the senior, like the general manager, he kept encouraging people around me, go back to school, get this designation and so on and so forth. But he never asked me about, what are your goals? Why aren't you going up in your career? Or are you even going up in your career? So once I graduated, my director told him, okay, she's graduated. We're so happy for her and everything. And he's just like, okay, he just kept going to the other white lady, who's blonde that, pushing her to move ahead and pushing her to move ahead. So you find that you end up working twice as much, right? Or even more, especially for Black people of color, like Black men, to get the same opportunities, even if you are even better than them. So in my head I was like, why aren't you asking me? Even if I've graduated, can't you at least take the time to say, oh, congratulations, that's good, and maybe say, like Olive has finished, you should also go ahead and try and pursue that designation. So you see, for me it was not, it's like, okay, whatever, but for him his focus was on this particular white Caucasian lady, and it was open. It's not, less Canadians are friendly and everything, so it's not as overt, as open as the US, which
Yeah.
has brought so many issues. But if you read between the lines, you're like, if I'm your boss, I will encourage all my students to pursue a designation or to move up higher in their careers, not just one person, because even myself, I can be racist towards a white person by trying to favor someone who looks like me, who has the same experiences like me. So you learn to ignore them, live with them, and you're always trying to be ahead, have an extra diploma, have an extra skill, so that you come up higher, so that in case of anything, you're like, I have this skills, I have this, so I'm a little bit better than this other person. Because if you have the same opportunities, experience, and all, chances are they'll pick the other person over you.
And Olive, the reason for that, in my view, is when, if, for example, Jessica is white, when she comes into a room, it is assumed, without knowing anything about her, it is assumed that she's competent. In the workplace. Yeah, when Jessica comes in, it is assumed that Jessica knows what she's doing, she's competent because she's white. But if you and I walked into the same room, it is assumed that we're not competent. And that's why we have to keep proving that we are competent. We have to keep trying to do more, trying to get to that target earlier, because it is already assumed that you're Black, you're not going to do a good job. So, and as a result of this, what you described, the boss talking to the other person, not showing you, not asking you what are your goals, is what I would term isolation. And it's very common in the workplace. It's like we deal with other people in a particular kind of way, but we ignore you. So because you're a person of color, you are isolated. And of course, you want your job, you're not going to do anything. You just find yourself over time conforming, changing who you are so that you can fit in, so you can be accepted. And what happens to that person of color is that you lose your self-esteem. It's not a conscious thing because it happens over time. Or let's say, or you come up with an idea or suggestion and you're looked at funny, probably because you talk different. Obviously, you're from a different person. Any right-thinking person would expect that you would talk differently. But it is, I think some people that are white, they look at the person who looks different from them, whose hair is different, who has a different accent, as being not so smart. Like, why can't you talk the way I talk? Then something must be wrong with you. Why is your hair different from the way mine is? Because the perception is that, Jessica, you look at yourself, you're blonde, yeah, this is normal, right? And then it says, we are normal, and they are the others. So in the mind of the person, it's not a conscious thing, but it's just like, we are the ones, this is how a normal person should look. But then we have the other people. That's the way I read it. Jessica, what do you think?
I have a couple of thoughts. I think traveling to different countries can really help humble that, right? When you go to another country and you're not how everyone else looks or speaks, different languages will, trying to learn a new language will definitely put you into that position of, wow, I don't feel like the smartest person here. And, going back to that job scenario, I have an interesting story about that in which when I was competing for a job many years ago, I was in my early 20s and I was competing against, there was a pool, but I knew one of the other people that was competing, and this was a Black woman who I'd worked with previously, and I wound up getting this job. And when I met her several months later, she said, "Oh, what happened with that competition?" And I said, "Oh, I did get the job." And she said to me, "Of course you did. Of course they're going to hire the cute blonde," is what she said to me. And I was really offended. I was like, "What do you mean? I worked really hard," right? And so that was a time where I didn't understand how much harder that a person with a different skin color would have to work, right? And that extra effort does not take away my effort.
No.
So I think that there are a lot of perceptions, and there are gross misconceptions on the part of a lot of white people. And I think that having the time to understand and experience other cultures will help it's, just a different way of speaking is not a different intellectual level.
Perfect. You put it's not a different intellectual level, but that is the perception. You were talking about, I want to talk, also take us towards the different kinds of racism. There's the one we've described, and there's another kind that some people who want to come across as "I'm not racist" actually end up doing something that is racist. That's the funny thing. So there was a time we're having this conversation in the country about maybe people can have their head covered for their ID cards. Do you recall that? Like, obviously, if you're going to be identified, your face has to show, right? Mm-hmm. That's just what your identity is. We look at your face. But some people, in an attempt to show that I'm not racist, was supporting that it's okay to cover your face in your ID card. But what they were actually saying, I'll tell you what they were actually saying. To me, look, those people are not smart enough to understand that the concept of identity means we see your face. So you have a group of people saying, okay, because I'm of this ideology and I want to really show that I support every race, you know what? It's okay to cover your face. It's not okay. It's another kind of microaggression. Because what you're actually saying is they're not smart enough to know that we need to see their faces. So you know what? Just let them. So sometimes, it's so wide that even if we had all day, we couldn't, go through everything. There's another one that I find, maybe Jessica, you'll be able to respond to this. Maybe I'm thinking too deep about it. But it's only if you will know this with your last name. So someone asked you, maybe you're somewhere, because, oh, what's your name, right? And I tell, my name is Adenike. I'm fine with how do you pronounce that because it's new to you. And I say, oh, this is how you pronounce it. But where it really, I find it irritating is when people go this way. Oh, Adenike, what an exotic name. It's like you're singing. Like, I don't need it's a beauty. I don't need you to validate. It's just a name. Like, Jessica, how would you feel if what should I say, Jessica? And I'm like, Jessica. Oh, what an exotic name. Like, what's that? It's not necessary. It points to the fact that you already don't see me as the other. And because it should be normal. It's somebody's name. That's it. That's your name. How do you call it? Okay, we move on. But you already feel uncomfortable. No, talking about race is very uncomfortable. Jessica too was a bit not sure. How will I handle this conversation? And it's because it's difficult. It's uncomfortable. I'm uncomfortable talking about it, but we have to talk about it to do better, because the more we talk about it, the more people will think about it, and the better we treat one another. Olive was saying something about it's not only the Caucasian that can be racist. Everybody has a bit of bias in them. and I'll tell you a little bit of story coming from Nigeria. A cousin of mine, her husband's sister-in-law was about to get married to a white person. Things have changed now, but in Nigeria previously, it would be acceptable if a Nigerian man was getting married to a Caucasian woman, no problem. But if it's a Nigerian woman getting married to a Caucasian man, it raises a lot of flags. I'm sure you're wondering why that is. Because then it's changed now with the globalization and everything. Then there was a perception, talking about biases, that white men are mostly perverts. So if your daughter is going to get married to a white man, oh my goodness, what happened to her? So they couldn't invite people to this wedding. I'm serious. My cousin was married to the man, but they didn't invite us to the wedding because to them it was an embarrassment. Like people would think, oh, is their daughter, oh, is she a prostitute? You know, that sort of thing. But it makes no sense. It's silly. So everybody has some kind of bias. But now I said it's not like that anymore. Why? There's been education, globalization. You've come to see that even if you watch a movie and somebody is asking their wife to do some weird things, doesn't mean every single white man would do that. So because of the education, because of the exposure, because of the globalization, now you see many Nigerian women getting married to Caucasian, and it's not, it's no longer perceived that way, but it was that way. And only this is to you. When I was in high school, usually your last year you would have 2 books to read. One would be Shakespeare and one would be an African written book. So in my year we read Julius Caesar, and the African written book was called Tell Freedom, like speak about freedom. It was based on the apartheid in South Africa at that time. And in that book, we got to a point in the book that the author spoke about segregation amongst the oppressed. So segregation amongst the oppressed. So that is, now you have a group of colored people, because they have been oppressed, because they have lost their self-esteem, because they have been made to feel less, they even begin to segregate amongst themselves. I see that here, that in the workplace, Black people don't want to be friends with Black people at work, because they think if I befriend other Black people, how will I be perceived? It's really, no, it's when there is oppression of any sort, or racism in this case, it damages the psyche. That people are, like, even if they were going to conduct an interview, if a Black person was going to conduct an interview, it's rare that the Black person would hire a Black person. The Black person would rather, if Jessica and I competed for a position, for example, we did exactly very well, even if I did better, that Black person, because of that segregation amongst the oppressed, that thing would rather hire you. Olive, am I right?
Yes, for sure. And even we go even into skin color. The lighter you are, the more preferred you are amongst even your Black people or people of color. So one thing I find even in because Africa is a continent and not a country, so you find that people from your own country would not even support your business, but someone else from a different country will come to you and not support someone from their own business, because they're like, there's this perception, oh, they're going to talk, oh, they're going to know my business, oh, they're going to do this and that. And sometimes it's perceived that when you hang out with other Black people, you're not as cool, or you're not as advanced as you should be, especially
Exactly.
I guess in the government. Yeah, because you want to go to higher positions,
Olive,
and the only way.
Hold your thought, Olive. Jessica, is that what we said about Black people turning on one another, or thinking that, oh, if I associate with other Black people, then I'm not considered cool? Is that new to you?
That is new to me. I'm aware of colorism, but I was not aware of this occurrence. That's like that.
But does it surprise you, given the fact that when a group of people have been isolated, demeaned, somewhat oppressed, told to be treated, maybe not so, but treated as less. Does it surprise you that that would happen in that community?
Broken down in those terms, unfortunately, no. Right? It's like you don't want to associate for fear that I don't know what the word is, but I can see what you're saying. But I would never have, I wouldn't have known that until you just shared that.
It is a result. It's one of the outcomes of racism. Olive, go ahead.
Mm-hmm. And you find that there's also this notion, not just at work, even the neighborhoods you live in and the sports your children participate in. You know, you find that if it's a certain sport, because obviously the more expensive it is, maybe the less affordable it is for people of color. And you find say like black person whose kid is doing hockey, they feel like they really have made it in Canada. They've achieved the Canadian dream. And they'll do whatever it takes to make sure you don't join that clique, you know. Certain neighborhoods are more maybe Caucasian than others because of the price points. You know, how many people will be able to afford a $1.1 million home? And they'll make sure, you know, and they like it's a status symbol. Like, hey, we live in. I've had people say, "Oh, in my neighborhood, we're the only
I'm
black
the only
people."
black.
And I'm like, yeah, you know, in my department, I'm the only black. I'm the only director in my department or in my company or whatever, and it makes you feel very good, you know, like, you know, I have made it. And you find that you're not giving people a hand up. No one is asking you for handouts, but you can give, you're there so that you can help open opportunities for others. And others go the extreme. They're like, okay, if I, you know, help to hire this person or bring this person to the department and then they don't perform well, it's going to look bad on me. But people other races, they do the same. They help each other out, you know, because
Absolutely.
you did your part and then the person has to come and perform, you know. But in our communities, it's always like, you know, I don't want to hang out with those black people because they don't want it. I'm aiming to become a manager, acting manager, director, so I don't want it to reflect negatively on me. And then they ended up, means I don't know if it's the right word to use, sucking up so much to like a Caucasian person because they want to move up, you know. So there's, like you said, I've never thought of it like, you know, the the segregation amongst the oppressed.
Yeah.
And it's so real. Sometimes, you know, you sit back and you're just like, so if you're the only director in your group and everybody else is a minority, and
But Oli, do you know
you know
what the
you
person is saying? When the person says, I'm the only black person in my office. We're the only black family in my neighborhood. I want to explain to you what that person is saying. So what that person is saying is, I have moved closer to the level of the oppressors now.
Mm-hmm.
That's what, you know, like, okay, these people, so I have earned I have now earned the right to be almost Caucasian. I've moved up, you know, to the neighborhood where the people that I consider superior. It's an acceptance of an inferiority complex. And so, because if you say that, what is that? So what? But to the person, it's not just like it's a nice neighborhood. It's no longer enough for the person with the low self-esteem and inferiority complex. It's not enough that the neighborhood is a good neighborhood. But it's only a good neighborhood because it's mostly Caucasian.
That's very colonized thinking, right? So that is, yeah, I think, a term that I've heard for this. There's an author, Mona El-Tahawi, and she's a feminist author, and she describes women who uphold patriarchal and colonial systems as the bootlickers of the patriarchy.
Oh yeah. Oh, I love that. They are the bootlickers. That. And sometimes people do this without thinking. They do it because they've heard somebody say it. Somebody, you've had someone say, oh, I'm the only black director in blah, 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 blah. And then you to become like the black family on your street. And then you think, oh, when that person moved up, that person felt this way. So, you know, that now I'm actually doing good because I mean, Go ahead.
And some of this comes even from our upbringing, like those of us who are not, I find the kids who are being born and raised here by people of color, they are changing that norm, right? But those who are raised back home, you find like back home, so in Nigeria, you live in Lekki, you know, and someone, hi, my name is Adenike. I live in Lekki. Like, why do I need to know where you live? In my country, the schools you go to, the international schools, the neighborhood you live in, that you see that class system, we bring it because it's an upbringing, it's a mindset that, oh, then you are better than everyone else because you live in Lekki. In my country, you live in Karen. Your kids go to international schools, so obviously they're guaranteed to go to the US or UK or Canada for university. So that's the same mentality that's instilled in their children. And then when they come up here, they're like, okay, I live, like you'd hear people say, I live in Manotick. I live in Greeley. I live in, those upscale neighborhoods. And it's like, it's a status symbol because that's, like you say, colonial thinking. That's how you are raised.
Totally.
If you live in this neighborhood, you're better than someone else who lives in a different neighborhood.
The interesting thing, Olive, I'm glad you mentioned that, is that bias, there's no way we can eradicate it. If we were all one color here, people would come up with other reasons to segregate. If we're one color, people would talk French, English. If we were one color, if we were one color and one language, then people would talk class. So people would always find a reason for prejudice. That something must happen. But what we need, I want us to talk now solution. What do we do? Understanding the impact that racism, how do we respond? No, let's start with this. How do we respond? We have a couple of options. Do we ignore and just keep going? Yeah, ignoring it's like propagating it. Then people will keep doing it if we don't speak out. So what do we do? How do we change things? Understanding that it affects the psyche of people. People lose self-esteem. People begin to conform. They change who they are just so as to be on the safe side. And some people begin to have this colonial thinking because they have accepted that they are less than, they're not as smart, they're not as good as the others. What do we do? If somebody, for example, okay, let's say, what do we do generally before we go to specifics? How do we respond if a Black person faces this microaggressions or even aggression in some instances? What should that person of color do?
You always, yeah, okay, just
go ahead, Olive. Since you started, go ahead.
Okay.
What should we do?
So I think number one, you start with yourself, because maybe I'll bring a little bit of the extreme. I remember one time, not everything is racism. Mm-hmm. That's number one. You have to take responsibility too, because sometimes you correct someone at work and they say it's because I'm Black. I mean,
but let's talk about where it's actually racism. Where it's actually racism.
It's actually racism. So that's what I'm saying. Before even start with yourself. Start with yourself. As a person, because as long as, like we said, there always, there's a bias. There are many Caucasians who are learning, all these cultural differences and everything. They're trying their best, but you have to start internally. If you're ask yourself, where do you want to go in life? And if you, because those things you're going to go through them from time, like you said, you can't eliminate it 100%. Maybe years to come. I mean, since Martin Luther time, it's getting better, but it's not where we need to be. We've made progress, but we're not where we need to be. But because it's affecting them, this is the age of talking about mental health. A lot of people have been affected by this. Mentally, they just feel they can't make it. They give up because maybe you've been applying for positions, and every time you come short, maybe you're the second or the third, and you've done that the last 5 years. Like how do you expect that person to feel? So I think if you have gone through those type of instances, because others have gone through more racism than others, it's a matter of just doing self-evaluation, and knowing that if it's a department and that's work towards leaving that department. You need to, in mental health, you really need to move away from the triggers. What's triggering that psychic whatever mental health issues, and then always, thinking yourself, I'm not what they're saying I am. I have done my best. I have done this, and this. If it's a department and that's where you're facing it, you can do your best to educate. Like I always educate my Caucasian colleagues, I come from this, we do this, and they always appreciate that, funny enough, because they're like, I wouldn't have known that if you didn't tell me, so I take that first step to educate them, and tell them, by the way, in my culture, we do this, we do this, we do this. Sometimes we bring food that is completely out of the norm. You know, our culture, sometimes, how do you celebrate Christmas? We celebrate Christmas this and this. So also take the honest to educate people, because sometimes sometimes they just don't know. Ignorance. Let me just say, ignorance is no bliss, but sometimes people are ignorant because they're not exposed or they're not as educated. So maybe take that first step and try to teach them, this is where you're coming from. This is what your cultural background is, and then from there, you're obviously not going to change someone overnight, but with time, hopefully, as they understand, the situation will, remedy itself. But even if it doesn't, then you have a choice to leave that toxic environment, so to speak, and move to something else that's better. But if you don't start with yourself, because we can't keep bogging ourselves down and think I cannot do it, because it's hard for sure, but you have to rise up and say, that's not who I am. I'm better than this level. And usually this racism is very big in the workplace, more than people don't really talk about the neighborhoods and the schools and all, but the workplace is where all this escalates, because these are people's livelihoods, and they work
and then that's
so
where
hard.
you can use power against people, because that's where they get paid.
Exactly.
And and you can get away with it.
Exactly. Because people are scared.
People are scared to talk.
Yeah, people are scared to talk.
And that's why,
because
because you can get away with it, then you do it. Jessica, do you have any input on how, maybe it's a difficult question for you, but how should the Black person respond to racism?
Well, I don't know how you should respond to racism, but I think that Caucasian people should start with self-education, right? So I heard Olive say that, you should, that you as Black people should educate white people. And I think that, I know personally, I appreciate when certain things are shared with me, but there is a level of responsibility that I think white people like to shrug off by saying, oh, well, I just didn't know. But I think that there are now, it's 2021, that there are so many resources available to white people to go and learn, what is unconscious bias? There, especially in the past year, with everything that has been shared, right? And how BLM became even bigger as a movement. If you can sit in front of, if a Caucasian person can sit in front of someone and say, well, I had no idea that this was going on at this point, I call BS on that.
Absolutely.
And so I've heard a lot of, don't actually turn to Black people to educate you. Go and educate yourself. Find out how to decolonize your mind, how to, this country, this is racism in Canada that we're talking about. It was founded on racist principles. So go learn about that. Do it yourself, and then find someone who, number one, is willing to have a conversation. Ask for permission to have a conversation, instead of assuming that everyone who is a person of color is going to be willing to tell you how you're racist.
Perfect. I think those are the kind of solutions that we need. Like you guys have spoken about already, is that if you're Caucasian, educate yourself. It's not every Caucasian that will have the opportunity of somebody coming to tell you. Ask questions. Be curious about other people, because all you really need to get is that people are people at the end of the day, right? It's just a different kind of skin. And also to the person of color, look within yourself for strength. I would say speak out. And when you speak out respectfully, and not in an aggressive manner, when you speak out, you're not only helping the person who is perpetrating the racism, but you're also helping those coming after, so that person would actually think about it before they do the same thing again. I went to the bank some time ago. I've been using the same bank for years, over 15 years. So I went to every single time I've been to that bank, all I do is I put in my debit card, punch in my PIN, and I do my transaction, and I go. This particular time I went in, did exactly the same thing. I can't remember what I went to the bank to do, but it was recently. And the lady said to me, oh, can I have your ID card? I was like, So I said, That was my ID. Because like that's how I've done my business in this bank. So she said, no, I need another piece of ID. I felt uncomfortable, but I brought up my driver's license and I gave it to her. So at the end, and then I spoke to her, I said, why did you ask me for this second ID? I've been coming to this bank for about 18 years or more, and I've never had to bring out another second ID after putting in my card. She was like, that's the way we do it. So I said, that's really odd. So she said, do you want to speak to the manager? I said, no, I don't want to speak to the manager. But when I got to the car, I didn't like it. So I called the bank. And the person I spoke to, I said, have you guys changed your procedures? And so the person said, well, that it's always been up to the person at the cash to decide whether it's just, if they can just choose to do it. So I said, okay, I didn't make a big deal of it, but I spoke about it because I kind of believe that she did that because of my color. It's never happened to, like, everybody knows, she doesn't know me, she's new, but it's never happened to me before. Like, I put in my card, I have my ID card, I have my debit card, I have my PIN number, you are in. You can ask a few questions, but like that was really odd. But what I've decided as an individual to do more of is to actually speak out. Not for myself, but for the other young people coming after, so that that person can know that it wasn't lost on me what you did. Because sometimes people think you don't get it. Many times they think you don't get it, that you're not smart enough to know what's going on. Like, I just smile. But now I speak up more, not for myself, for the other people come that we should speak up. And also, I saw this very, very nice quote. The person said, people's heart cannot be legislated. We can legislate how people feel, but their behavior can. So even if though the workplace, the church, because it happens at the church too, it happens at the church.
Yeah.
The church, you can't legislate people's heart, but their behaviors can be controlled. And so that is why we have the rules of organization of the government is that no matter how you feel about this group of people, either way, this kind of behavior is not acceptable. So I think that's where organizations should come in and kind of legislate behaviors. And I think the government of Canada is trying to do that. Some offices are trying to do that even more than ever before. But I think it's just very important that people know that it's a lot of damage to the individual that is treated with prejudice. And it's the kind of damage that it's forever. And that's where you get results like people saying I'm the only black on my street. I don't want to have black friends. Some people actually marry a white person to make life easier for their children because now their children will be mixed. That is how serious this racism thing is. And I just hope we've had a short conversation, but it was really, really meaningful. I hope that our audience, black, white, brown, that we will all do better and respect one another, that regardless of our skin color. If I took a knife or whatever and I cut through Jessica, the blood is going to be red. If I cut through myself, the blood is going to be red. We're the same. We're the same, and we need to treat one another with respect and understanding that I may talk different from how you speak. I may look different, but I'm certainly not dumb just because I speak different. Thank you. Is there anything you want to say in closing, Ole, Jessica? Anything you want to say in closing?
Yeah, I like the point where you raised about speaking up, because from far too long, including myself, we just keep quiet, say, okay, and you get to, like you said, you conform, you just get used to it, ignore it, and you're told, ignore it, especially our cultures, you ignore because you need that job. Right. And that's what I'm saying, especially in the workplace, because that's where you can exert some sort of control. So you're told, if you talk, these are the repercussions, so maybe with the BLM movement and everything that happened last year, it's really ruffled some feathers, opened up, or maybe most like forced people, like organizations and companies, to start looking at this, this issue of racism, more closely. Governments all over the place are being held accountable. Many workplaces are taking this very seriously. Businesses I've seen even in different platforms that belong to on Facebook, where someone doesn't feel treated well, they come and, say, this is how I was treated. And people are like, I'm boycotting that business. And you find the owners come out and again, control the fear of losing revenue. They're like, I'm so sorry, but that's not what we meant. And I'm so, and they try to remedy. Unfortunately, it's because of the repercussions that they will do that. But if there were no repercussions, I'm not sure they would actually address that issue. So more and more people need to speak out, even for the sake of our children and for the sake of the younger community generation that is coming up. And we stop this thing of this thing like, oh, these are the repercussions that will happen if you speak. But like you said, it's long lasting. Some people have been hurt.
It's long lasting,
and they still nurse the hurt, and they end up hurt because hurt people do what they hurt others. So you find this has even led to even violence in the home, because you come and you feel so frustrated as a black man, and then what happens? Your family is affected, because you feel at this point in your career you should have been in this level. So it's not just a career thing, it's even the impact it's having on people's homes,
and that's
and
like,
upbringing.
sometimes people don't want to speak out, because if you speak out, it's going to be, oh, angry black woman or angry boy, so because people take this in, and then you find a lot of violence in the young people, because it's the anger of the way they've been treated over time from when they were young. So and then people say, oh, why is this happening in this community? It's a result of what has been done to the individuals. So one of the things that we have to keep talking about it, because the more we talk about it, the more we think about it, and the more we think about it, the more we take actions to kind of curtail it as much as we can. Jessica, in your closing, what do you want to say in closing?
For any Caucasian people that are listening in, I would encourage you to be willing to get uncomfortable with these conversations, because it's through the uncomfortable conversations that you can grow. And you're gonna mess up, and you're going to have the ways that you carry unconscious bias show up, and it's going to be in your face. And unless you're willing to face that, you can't expand beyond it. And it's only through that discomfort that you get to grow up here, but that you can connect with more people.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Once again, to our viewers, if you've heard us or you can hear us, please subscribe to the channel. Add your comments. Let's know what you think. Thank you. In closing, I'll start with Oli. I want you to pitch. You're a successful businesswoman. You do a lot of things. You're an accountant. You're into real estate. And I just want to make a pitch for your business to our viewers. It's tax season.
It's tax season here, so I'm an accountant. I have a small accounting firm where I help individuals and small business owners to do their taxes, educate them about tax strategies that are out there to help them save more money, because you can make as much money as you want, but if most of it is going back to the government just because you're not aware of the right tax strategies, then there's no point in doing that business. And even on top of that, I do financial literacy. I educate people to be more literate with their finances. One thing COVID showed us is that if you don't have money for a rainy day, anything can happen, because this is a pandemic that no one expected, including the government. So the governments that were financially able to cushion their countries, the countries have not suffered as much as other nations. The same thing, those who are financially able to cushion or weather this storm are not as badly off as those who are not prepared. So I offer courses, financial literacy courses, anywhere from financial one-on-one, debt management, and even investments, because you don't just get money and put it in the bank, you invest. So one area that I'm really big on is real estate. So as a real estate investor, I help my clients and even people who may not be coming to me for bookkeeping or taxes, but to invest, how to pick up the right real estate investment, how to do your calculations and how to manage that investment so that it ends up being either a nest egg, to supplement your retirement. Because as you know, when you retire, your income is, so much less, and to be able to create generational wealth so that your children who are coming after you, our children, will not have to go through the struggles we went through. We give them a hand up so that they have a higher platform to start on and then build on that wealth.
Okay. Thank you, Olive. And viewers, you're going to, if you look down in the link, I'm going to put more information on how you can contact Olive. Just to say, there was a time we had Olive come to our house to come and speak to the children about investing and about real estate specifically. And as a result, I mean, with this, good things have happened. So I encourage you to get in touch with Olive. It's going to be really good for you. Jessica, your turn.
I am the owner of Jessica Dawn Coaching and the coach at Jessica Dawn Coaching, and I offer both personal and professional coaching. So on the professional side, I help entrepreneurs really figure out their systems and how to move their businesses forward, increase their revenue, and see where things can be tightened up. And from a personal point of view, I work a lot with people who are at transition points and help them reconnect with themselves through hypnosis and integration through trauma work.
Awesome. Also, I'm going to have Jessica's information at the bottom of the video, so you can contact her. And your life is not going to be the same. So, ladies, thank you very much for stopping by today. It was a great conversation that we had. I believe I'm going to be reaching out to you again sometime to talk about another very interesting topic. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day, and God bless you.
Thanks.
Bye.
God bless you. Thank you for having us. Bye.